welcome back to our podcast, The Blend Effect.
I'm Radhika.
And I'm Sayli, and today our topic is
Spoken and unspoken rules of Indian immigrant parents.
So this one should be interesting.
Yes.
We actually reached out to the public and we asked you guys if you had any rules that you grew up with. And so some of you had some really great answers. So what we'll do is we'll first start off with a game. I will ask you some questions and we have a buzzer here to mark that
Thank
you experienced that rule.
Okay, awesome.
So I'll go ahead and start. Yeah. I'm just going to start asking you questions and then you can buzz if you had that experience.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Radhika will ask me the same question.
Yes.
All right, let's get started. You had to get good grades in school. You could not wear revealing clothing. No going out late or after school. No sleeping over with friends. Oh my gosh. No dating in school. No talking back. Have to tell a parent where you're going and who you're going with.
Yep.
No alcohol. No going to parties. Did they even have parties in high school?
If they did, I don't think I was invited to them, or my parents probably would have never let me go.
Yeah.
So I don't even think it mattered.
And our friends knew that too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. No going to school dance? You're able to go.
Yeah.
Okay,
I was allowed to go to school dance.
If you go out one day, you can't go out the next.
I don't even think I went out one day. So there was probably no next day to go out.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Your friends have to have the same ambition or drive in school.
Oh, yes.
You can't have a job, you can only focus on studying.
So I did have a job, but there were some kind of limitations or restrictions so that I could still focus on my studies, but we'll talk more about that afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah.
No boyfriends.
It's yes.
How about forget boyfriends, but no male friends in general?
Oh,
yeah.
No, I mean, I was going to say, I don't even think that was a said rule. I think it was just an expectation. So yes.
Okay. And then no voicing controversial opinions in public.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, you were almost all for all.
Yeah. Okay, Sally, your turn. Let's see what kind of rules you had to live with. Okay. So you had to get good grades. No revealing clothing. You were not allowed to go out after school.
Oh yeah, my curfew was 3 p.m.
Oh yeah, so you were pretty much home from school and that was it.
Yeah,
so
I
you
went to school and I
came
came home from school unless I had soccer season. Then 5 p.m.
Right, exactly. Okay, so no sleeping over, at your friends' houses or whatever.
Yeah, I mean I'll partly.
Yeah. Okay, no dating in school.
Oh my gosh, I don't even think I was allowed to date when I was older.
Yeah, okay.
I did, but
no talking back.
Oh yeah.
You have to tell your parent where you're going and who you're going with.
I mean, I'm not gonna buzz this because I didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. No alcohol.
Oh yeah.
No going to parties.
Like we said, I don't think I didn't even know there were parties.
Right. No going to the school dance.
Oh yeah, I wasn't allowed to.
Okay. If you went out one day, then you couldn't go out the next day.
Again, I didn't go out.
Same thing as me. Yeah. Your friends have to have the same ambition or drive as you in school.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You couldn't have a job, only had to focus on your studies.
No
boyfriends and no male friends.
Oh yeah, no way.
And then the last one is no voicing controversial opinions in public.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know what? I think that these rules existed. I can't say that I necessarily followed all of them.
Yeah.
But it was funny because especially that last question that you asked, no controversial opinions in public. My dad, even to this day, will be like, oh, don't voice your opinion about this. We'll get into trouble about that.
Yeah.
And, I won't say what because, this is public even right now.
Exactly. We don't want to offend anyone, but yeah.
But yeah, usually what I'm expected not to voice in public, which I definitely don't follow, is political comments. They really don't want me making political comments out loud. And, anybody who knows me knows that.
So yeah,
I don't necessarily follow that. So
I think what happened with our parents in that time was that they were kind of somewhere halfway, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were still trying to hang on to everything Indian that they could because, they wanted to maintain their roots and whatnot and really culture us appropriately too, right? Pass on, a particular culture, certain decorum and whatnot. But I also think like they also had to at the same time like kind of behave like American or Canadian. They couldn't be like too Indian. So this whole like flying under the radar thing is like, I think they just like didn't want to get in trouble, right? Because they just didn't know, because they were probably new, relatively new, to the country at that time. And they were like, oh gosh, like, we are immigrants here. We want to play it safe. They probably weren't really aware of all the laws and their rights. But I think at least for my parents, it was a lot about like, I just want to like not get in trouble and just not do anything to like catch any negative attention or any attention. So,
and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they didn't have the luxury to do so.
Right.
It's exactly what you were saying, is that they lived in this country, but they were very aware of the fact that they came from outside. Yeah. That they were minorities. Yeah. There wasn't so much of a social movement like there is today, where people are defending the minorities. Yeah. And so they didn't have the luxury to go out and like put up a fight, even if they were right. Right. Yeah. And so.
Yeah. No, I like 100% agree. And in fact, even if we just sort of put aside like political views, but even if you think about like getting in trouble at school, right? Like, I was always kind of told, first of all, like, don't get in trouble at school. Like, don't do anything to like, get in trouble. But if something was to happen or whatever, I think it was always like, oh my gosh, like I think our parents necessarily didn't really always advocate for us directly, but they were like, oh, like, what got you in trouble, and why did you do this, and now how is this gonna look, and they were always like, okay, well, just like even if you got in trouble, it was always like, okay, well, just like listen to the teacher and just get your punishment over with, and let's just forget this ever happened. Like it was never, which now I think with like my own child today, if something like that was to happen, I would be the parent that like wants to make sure her rights are taken care of and investigate what happened. But our parents, I think, just like weren't brave enough to do some of that.
Or they, like I said, they didn't have the luxury to do so. And I'm really glad that you bring that point up, because I want to share a story. Okay, yeah. When I was in elementary school, I have this incident that occurred. Okay. And man, if I could go back and find that teacher, to this day, it bothers me so much to the inside. I wish I could just tell her she was, she could have handled the situation in a better way. But essentially what happened was, when I was in, it must have been 3rd or 4th grade, and one of the girls in my class had just discovered where if you take a magnifying glass, you can actually like direct the sun rays through it and burn like patterns in the leaves and stuff, which, at that age we didn't know. Right. I don't even think I would have known that as an adult. Really. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But she had learned this at home, and she had brought her magnifying glass to school, and she had been sitting on the ground like testing it out or whatever. And I remember running by in the playground and just being like, oh, what's she doing? So I stopped by for probably like 3-4 minutes to see what she was doing. Right. And then I ran off. Yeah. Right. And a few days later, I get called into the principal's office. Okay. And I get told that I'm going to have a major violation, which is like a week-long detention for arson. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. And I just remember being like, first of all, what's arson? Yeah. Then I learned, trying to start a fire. And I was like, you didn't even have to do anything. I was like, I didn't go with that intention. Yeah. I didn't even touch anything. Yeah. I just saw what she was doing and ran off. Yeah. So I guess one of the kids had like tattled on whoever, had come by. But it was so unfortunate, because instead of using this as a learning opportunity where the teacher could have been like, don't do that again. But, this is a really great lesson to learn about like the sun and the rays and whatnot. She put us in major violation for arson. And I went to that week long of detention, and I cried and cried and cried because, as you know, we weren't allowed to get into trouble. Yeah, yeah. And at that time, my parents were very supportive of me. Yeah. They were very supportive of me at home. Where they said, we know you didn't do anything, and it's okay. Just go through your detention. Just get it over with. You're really young. You can go on. It's not going to be on your record or anything. But imagine that now 30 years later, here I am at this age where I am still mentally bothered by that situation. Yeah, yeah. And I often wonder how different it would have been if my parents had marched into the principal's office and said, no. Yeah. Right. Absolutely not. Right. My daughter didn't do anything. Right. And we'll fight you for this. Yeah. But they didn't. And it's not that they were bad parents. It's that they didn't have the luxury. That's not the life that we lived. We didn't have the luxury of having parents who would be able to come and, put up that fight. 100% agreed. And I think it's so funny because, we think a lot about, like how we parent our own children now. And, we also hope, right, gosh, we hope, this never happens with like our own kids. Right. But if it were to,
I think I would go into the principal's office
100%,
today. And
yeah.
I sometimes wish, like, gosh, I wish our parents had more power, more strength, more confidence in themselves to come and like advocate for us. But then now thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I guess like maybe they weren't fully wrong. Imagine being new to a country and not knowing what the rules were, right? So it's an interesting toss-up of the flying
Because I mean,
under the radar.
imagine if we went to a different country,
right?
You know, and a third country, I'm
right?
saying, not like India or America, and say they had a different sort of societal system that we weren't acquainted with, we'd probably be a little bit scared to react there as well.
Agreed.
A, you don't know if you're going to be kicked out of the country, which is probably the least of your worries, because you can just go back home. You don't know how the people of the society are going to treat you. You know, I mean, these days in America, anyone will pull out a gun at this point. You know? So really, it's kind of scary to think about. But I do feel like that did impact me a lot mentally, and I don't know if you would agree to this, but
I'm very sure. I think there have been even other situations, right? Like, if you think about even like getting a bad grade, for example, right? Like, again, today, if like my child was struggling with math, I would be in there to talk to the teacher and figure out like what was going on and how we can help them. But I think with my parents, it was always like, okay, like we'll help you at home, and we'll try to figure this out like on our end. But even like approaching, I think the school or the teacher, at least for my parents, was like a big like, we don't want to touch that territory. We'll just figure it out ourselves, because that's just how it is.
Well, and I think that actually brings up a really great rule or unspoken rule, which I think actually in Indian culture is a good thing, which is respecting your teachers, seeing them as another, you know, adult figure in your life who is allowed to discipline you. Because I don't necessarily think that that was the experience I had at school from other non-Indian classmates. Absolutely. Maybe I did from, you know, the classmates that were Asian or, you know, kind of the stereotypical get good grades gang. But, you know, it was funny in high school. I remember in Spanish class, we had students who were really trying to be there and learn. And then you had students who were throwing spitballs at the teacher and just doing all these weird things that, you know, had we grown up in India, that would have just not happened ever. And I distinctly remember there was one time that the Spanish teacher, who also came from a culture where that wasn't allowed, called one of the parents openly in the class and was like, you know, your daughter is just really disrupting the class. And the mom yelled at the teacher.
Right? But this is so crazy because our parents would have never done that.
My parents would have probably came to school and whooped me right then.
Exactly, you know? Right? So, you know,
so I think that unspoken rule of like respecting your teachers is a good thing.
Right.
But at the same time, I think the distinction is that if your teacher is doing something wrong, which can happen, they're human as well, or if the school, and not that they're openly trying to hurt us, but you know, if they misassess the situation. I like you said, I do wish that our parents also had the luxury and the confidence to come in and say, hey, you're not doing right by my child. You know,
exactly.
And, even today, there's so many learning disorders that weren't studied when we were kids.
Absolutely not.
And, you know, a lot of times in our culture, it's like, well, why aren't you getting good grades? You're going to be in trouble because you're not doing this right or that right. And it's like, maybe that's just not that child's way of doing things. You know? And, there's so many like ADHD or so many different learning struggles that kids may have that are studied today that really should be looked into. You know, maybe that's something that because they didn't know about these things back then, they didn't think to look into them.
And I think, you know, kind of going back to the point about like parents wanting to like play it safe, right? So that was one of the other questions, right? You know, they wanted us to hang out with people who were like, you know, had the same kind of goals as us and were on the same like academic track as us, because I know with my parents, it was just like, they just didn't want us in trouble.
I mean, I think honestly, I would probably feel the same way about my daughter. I think I'm still trying to figure out where I, you know, where I land in this parenting gig. You know?
And I always say, right, like our childhood experiences completely shape us. So whether our parents were right or wrong or for all those things, I think it still influences the way that we now parent our children. But I just think now there's just more exposure, more awareness. And I'm just hoping that, you know, maybe because both of us have grown up here, that we have more of that confidence and that feeling that, hey, if I like go complain to the school about something, like they're not gonna, you know, throw me out of the country or do something extreme, it'll be fine.
I think, like you said, it shapes how I will probably raise my child, because I understand what I do to support her will impact her mental health. Because for me, like I said, to this day at 34 years old, I am still freaking out about this teacher in 4th grade who probably doesn't even remember who I am. And I don't even necessarily remember all of my teachers' names or who they are, but this teacher I remember because I was so distraught by that, you know, and then feeling helpless, right? Feeling like my parents couldn't do anything to help me
in
that situation, even though they were on my side, even though they supported me. I think that really sends the message to me, and probably what I would tell other people. Support your children. Stand up for your children. If your children are wrong, then they need to be disciplined by whatever adult entity is there. But if they're right, they absolutely need our support, and they need to know, mom's here, dad's here to take care of us.
We really did have the best of both worlds, I think, but sometimes the negatives did kind of come out, and I think it's totally shaped like how we're feeling now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the negatives helped us figure out what we need to do. It is interesting. I do think, again, I'll just reiterate that because of the impact I have seen it have on me. And I will probably take it to my deathbed.
Exactly. No, I mean, of course.
I wouldn't want my daughter to go through that. And so I think I would probably do the best I could to either support her when she's right or explain to her why she's wrong if she's wrong and why she's being disciplined. I also would want to say that while we have, people on visas here, our friends, who might be worried about the same things our parents were worried about, I think they do have more of a voice than they realize.
Oh, so true.
Right?
And the world is so different now. I think finally, one of the things that I want to kind of conclude with or kind of wrap up with is, try to keep an open mind. Right? And I think maybe our parents weren't always that great about doing that. Again, maybe because they were just scared or whatever it was. I don't know. I know.
I think it was just they were bringing over the values that they had in India, and they were trying to figure out how they're going to assimilate into the American culture. And, what works for them, what doesn't work. And actually, I think that's the right way to go about things, because you should figure out what your boundaries are. Those just happen to be their boundaries. And these just happen to be our boundaries.
Going back quickly to the open mind thing, I do wish my parents had kept more of an open mind because, had I been allowed to go to sleepovers or maybe like date more or whatever, maybe even they would have gotten more exposure on things, right? Because they kind of kept us very sheltered, right? So like they didn't even know what like dating someone non-Indian was like or what it was like, sending your kids to a party. Like I think now, again, if I was to find the middle ground, maybe I might have these similar rules for my daughter, who knows? But I think I might try to do it in like a more balanced way.
Right. Yeah. Maybe like figure out what kind of party is your kid going to.
Exactly.
I might send them to like a party with people that we know.
Right,
But may not send them to a party with like just the whole high school's coming.
Exactly. But that's the other thing, Sally, right? Is like with these unspoken rules, I think even if like there was a party that like we did want to go to, I think I just knew my parents were going to be like, no. So I didn't even bother asking. I was like, maybe I asked like the first 2 or 3 times. And after that, I was like, oh no, like, we don't want to touch that territory because like we know the answer is going to be no. Right. But anyway, I just wish that maybe keeping more of an open mind.
Even the clothing thing, right? It's funny because I think every culture has its own code of dress code, I should say. And coming to America, obviously people wear pants and tops and whatnot, as opposed to maybe like a Punjabi dress or sari or whatever. And it's interesting because I did have a very strict, and as you were also buzzing, certain clothing was just not allowed in the house. No shorts, no chote kapde, as they say. But I have a funny story where my mom actually, I don't remember how old I was. I must have been in high school, maybe 9th grade or something, where my mom had bought me some tops, right? And I loved them. They were my favorite 2 shirts, okay? But it just so happened that their sleeves were a little bit short. It was not sleeveless.
Just a little bit
short,
But
they were like, I don't know, like this much sleeve. But they were kind of loose. So I wore them a few times, and I remember my mom just being kind of like, I don't know about that anymore. She bought it. And then all of a sudden, one fine day, these tops disappeared. Okay, and I was like, man, where are my shirts? And did I misplace them? I looked everywhere for them. And, months go by, and all of a sudden, one day I'm in the laundry room, like doing something, and I see my 2 tops on the side being used as rags.
Oh my gosh. And she had bought them for you too. And so kind of sad.
They were being used as rags to like dry the ground.
Oh my gosh.
And when I talked to her, I was like, why did you do this? And she was just like, not okay. I just decided that
So you're not
okay. You're not wearing.
And you know what? We were okay just saying, all right.
Yeah,
like, we didn't fight our parents.
I was upset about it.
Yeah.
But what was I going to do?
Yeah.
She had already
mopped
the floor with
exactly. But going back to the clothing, you're asking if I had a story.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember, but when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, these things called like belly tops had like just come about, where they weren't fully short, but if you like raised your hands, your shirt would it was just like a shorter shirt.
Yeah.
And we were like not allowed to wear those, and everybody in the school was wearing them.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's not a big deal, because if you like don't raise your hands, you don't see your stomach. It's not a big deal. But my mom was like, no, like you can't wear that. Like that's not appropriate.
Yeah.
And now thinking back, like again with like my own daughter, like if she wanted to wear that, I don't think I might not care as much. Or maybe I think
again, there's boundaries, right? Where are we drawing the line as to? I mean, we're living in a society where people wear bikinis.
Exactly, right?
And my mom's concern with me wearing a short sleeve, not sleeveless, short sleeve, was bad attention from boys and stuff like that. And I was just like, they're probably busy looking at the bikinis.
Exactly. They don't care about this like top that's here, or if I raise my hands, you see your stomach.
And of course, it's about what's comfortable for them,
right?
Yeah. But at the same time, and I do have a problem with some of the clothing kids wear these days.
Yeah,
I do. I really do. And I don't know if my daughter will grow up one day and be like, why did my mom have a problem with like booty shorts where your butt's hanging out?
Exactly.
But I don't know. I think there's definitely a fine line between being progressive and being indecent. And to me, I think as long as we're not crossing that line, whatever that means for us.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a very interesting conversation. Probably go on. Did you want to, just because I think this is kind of a hot topic that might come up, the like no alcohol rule? Because I think the other ones kind of we've roughly talked about.
I mean, honestly, I'm still not allowed to drink alcohol.
Well, I was going to say, my parents were of the opinion that first of all, they were fine with us trying alcohol when we were of age. But the rule was we had to do it in front of them.
Oh, okay.
Because they were like, we don't want you like going to a party and getting like hammered there. Exactly. But like getting sloshed and whatever, and you better just do it at home so you know what like your limits are.
Right.
But I think what's interesting is that because they had that rule, like it was never appealing to me.
Right.
Because I knew that if I wanted to drink, I could just do it in front of them. Right. So that was never a big like. Yes, there were like the bad aspects of alcohol. They like talked about a lot, but they were like, but at the same time, if you're curious, like do it in front of us. But interestingly enough, these are good things that came out of this, right? Like this is the kind of positive thing is like, we had, a lot of rules, there were a lot of boundaries, a lot of restrictions, but at the same time, like it's kind of good too, right?
I agree.
We stayed, relatively safe. And
I do see this differentiation between me and my husband.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Because he grew up in India, right? Yeah. So I do think that if I had grown up in India, my rules wouldn't have been as strict. Because my parents would have been so comfortable in the environment we were growing up in. And so I think that because he grew up in India, there's a lot more things that he was allowed to do, or rather that his parents didn't ask him about. Yeah. Whereas my parents were very strict about it, right? Yeah. And just watching both of us, I think this is what I've concluded. Yeah. Okay. Is that whatever rules you set for yourself, for your children, you're always going to go one step ahead of that line. Yeah. Right? So if the rule was no dating, then I'm probably going to start dating when I feel like I'm old enough to do so, or like when I went to college. Yeah. But if I was allowed to date when I was 16, I might have dated when I was 14, or something like that. Yeah, yeah. And so people always just go one step ahead of what they are not allowed to do. So that's why I think it's not bad to set the line a little bit behind. You know, you set it a little bit early because your kids are going to cross that. Right. Or even yourself, right? Yeah, yeah. And I think our parents set those boundaries, which is why today we're not like off the rails completely, or we didn't have to go off the rails and then find ourselves, or whatever it may be. Exactly. म्हणून मग आज जेव्हा लोक आपल्याला विचारतात की how did your parents do it? And
this is this. I mean, these were the things. They again tried to keep us very cultured, but tried to let us blend in, but very carefully. I think correct. Very, very carefully, to the point that they didn't want us to be completely isolated or feel like outcasts. Or even though maybe we might have, I don't know. That's a different topic too. But they just really, truly, if I think about it slightly, like looking at our parents, both sets of parents, I really think that they actually did it very well. Yeah. They found a balance, I think, really, really well. I mean, maybe there's a few things maybe I wouldn't have done or what might have done differently, but I think that they did find that balance well. Right.
Well, and I think where they wherever they may not have possibly found the balance well, I think we learned from that.
Exactly.
And then going from there, who knows? I'm sure we'll make our set of mistakes.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, we're dealing with a whole other set of challenges,
exactly.
right? So yeah,
we live in the world of internet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a good chat.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun talking about this today.
Right. And I think if anybody has any other questions as to, what we may have experienced, send us a message. We'd be happy to respond, talk about it in a future podcast.
Absolutely. And I mean, as always, if you have any other suggestions for topic, please drop us a comment on our channel. Of course, we always ask that you like, share, and subscribe.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just going to say that. Please like, please share, please give us your feedback.
Yes. So we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, see you guys next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.